Hello and welcome to Strat News Global on a Saturday evening. India's elections have been extremely interesting this week, and when the results came out, it shocked almost everyone. Of course, it spooked the markets, as by now everyone knows. But as the dust has settled down and we are just 24 hours away from the third Modi government being inaugurated or sworn in on Sunday, it's time to look at how the world, especially the Western world, looks at the outcome of the election results. And that's why I thought this week's edition of Simply Nitin, which is otherwise a monologue from me on interesting topics or history or something that has happened recently. We have two eminent guests, analysts in their own right, on and India watchers, more importantly. Of course, also friends, and they are joining me on a Saturday morning, early morning, a little late morning from Europe and Washington D.C. Uh, this is something that we rarely do, this kind of a discussion. But this is the special edition of Simply Nitin. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Joining me, let me introduce my guests. Velina Chakarova, joining me from Vienna in Europe, Austria. Uh, India watcher, analyst, and a very strong India supporter as far as the international arena is concerned. And joining me very early morning from Washington, D.C. is again another old friend, Richard Rosso or Rick Rosso of CSIS, a very long time observer of the Indian scenario, especially what happens in the States. Thank you both for joining me and welcome to this program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me as well.
Thank you. Let me start with you, Rick. What are your first thoughts on the Indian election outcome? Because most of the world was rather surprised. Of course, in many ways, this has also strengthened India's democratic credentials. But your first thoughts?
I think that's right. I think overall to see the party somewhat chastened when it felt like they'd kind of tilted the levers of power a little bit too far, I think gives everybody some comfort. But the fact that they still have a strong enough hand to carry out some of the significant programs, particularly in defense and security, would also give us, I think, some confidence. But the one thing, as we were talking about before the show began, Nitin, is this is a reminder that the United States, to keep this alive over the long term, has got to find meaningful ways to engage regional parties. We got so used to single party majority, but in my 25 years of doing this, coalitions are kind of the norm. It came sooner than expected, but it's a big reminder.
That's true, absolutely. And that is what I think will be a new field to explore for the State Department as well as the businesses in United States. But we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But Velina, your first thoughts on the Indian election results?
Okay, of course, right now Europe is busy with its own election, which is going to be conducted in the next few days. It is about the future of the European institutions. That is similarly relevant actually for India and for the new coalition government, because probably there will be some political continuum. The current president of the European Commission, she has built a very stable relationship with the Prime Minister Modi. In fact, the relaunch of the negotiations of the free trade agreement happened during this commission. So here we have already one clear indicator. She congratulated Modi. In fact, if she's re-elected as president of the commission, we will have one very stable geo-economic continuum in the relationship. And it is, I would argue, even more important for India in this new mandate of the coalition government to actually try to sign this FTA because of the reconfiguration of global supply chains and also because of the troubled relationship with China. Now, the second important point, of course, goes back to the so-called member states, the key European powers. Here, of course, we have also already the first clear signals of the French President Macron, the Italian Prime Minister They already celebrated, and obviously they've built and invested a lot actually in the bilateral relationship along several portfolios. They are here to stay. They will have a very strong upper hand also in the new European institutions. Of course, let's say a wild card is UK, because UK is facing election as well, and there we have very big expectations of quite of a big political shift if the Labour wins the election. So here I would be a little bit cautious to make any predictions as to how the new relationship will look like in terms of the bilateral track between UK and India. But all in all, yes, indeed, there was a shock because everybody was relying on the exit polls. And right now we are commenting the European election saying that the exit polls are not trustworthy.
That's
But then
good
again,
lesson.
actually,
That,
then
that's
again,
a good
after
lesson
this,
to draw. That's a good
yes,
lesson to draw for the Europeans from the Indian expectation. But Rick,
yeah,
frankly, the expectations were, of course, for a third Modi majority government. Not having achieved that, how would you think the Modi government, incoming Modi government, would approach foreign policy as well as defense? You spoke about it in your first answer a little bit, but if you can elaborate, what is your assessment on that?
Yeah, I don't feel this coalition is going to be a big drag on Modi's hand in terms of international security. Some regional parties, those facing Sri Lanka, those facing Bangladesh, they do have a big stake in at least India's immediate neighborhood and have an impact, as we've seen in the past, on international relations. But from what I've seen and lots of engagement I've had over the years with both the JDU and the TDP, I don't suspect that they're going to put a break on it. In fact, the TDP during the long innings that Chandrababu Naidu had as chief minister before and part of a coalition actually looks to try to accelerate that. I was there point person for the business delegation when President Clinton visited Hyderabad, because we all kind of knew this is really a rising star on the global stage. Of course, that was 20 plus years ago, but it's good to see them back in the coalition, because they've actually been a booster of a lot of reforms. So neither party, I think, are going to provide a drag, and most of what India wants to do on security cooperation in particular isn't going to take legislation. The coalition is going to have a very light voice in that, and if anything, be supportive. So I feel we're in a pretty good space in the security side.
True. I'll come to you a little later on the state reforms, or the state role in economy and the domestic affairs, and how you look at it, because you watch that space very closely. But Velina, coming to you, there were reports, the think tank analysis on India's possible backsliding of democratic values, erosion of institutions, Modi turning more authoritarian if he won the elections third time and got a majority on his own. From there, we are now in a space where Modi is slightly constrained as far as numbers are concerned. So has that talk now subsided, that India is not a democratic country anymore, which was dominant? Do you think that has now vanished? Nobody's going to talk about it in coming years now?
well, first and foremost, it is important to highlight that actually India was always and will be defined and will continue to be defined as a functioning democracy. That's the main narrative coming from European institutions and European governments. And of course, for a fact that Europe pursues this values-based approach also in foreign relations. So yes, of course, there was a criticism on human rights, on religious freedoms, Hindu nationalism trends, and so on and so forth. I do not think that this criticism will cease to exist. On the opposite, it will be part of the portfolio, because the foreign policy of the European governments is being scrutinized by their societies and by a lot of NGOs and institutions and civil organizations. So this is here to stay. But I think that, following the election outcome, the Indian government, the coalition government, will also learn a little bit of humility, that it has to do its homework at the level of each and single province. And here, once again, I think that Europe is quite well positioned because, first and foremost, it's not only the 27 member states that have very, very strong relationship with the union government. They will be having also a portfolio that is certainly, oriented towards the needs for reforms in the individual provinces and states. The second important point is that we have also a representative for the European Union in general, who is going to, provide the portfolio for the institutional, let's say, track between India and the European Union. And in a sense, this is a big win. And of course, this portfolio will still entail, obviously, the human rights and freedoms, portfolio in itself as well. Last point on my side, my biggest fear in terms of upcoming geopolitical risks is actually linked, and this is not a phenomenon specifically for India or South Asia. We are facing similar risk here in Europe, and Russia also faced a similar situation with a terrorist attack. We expect that in the next few months there may be a critical number of new terrorist attacks being conducted, and this could actually have a very negative effect, of course, on the work of a new coalition government in India, but also obviously in Europe.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. But Rick, some people, our viewers are commenting live as we go ahead with the discussion. And one of them, Ranjan Pai, has actually asked, given your answers, he's saying, Rick, are you Indian? Seems to me that Rick knows Indian politics much more than we Indians ourselves do. It's a great tribute to your, work here in India. So I must say this, Ranjan, but let Rick say this, and he will say it, of course. But I'm saying this, that he's one of the best informed people on Indian state reforms, Indian state economy, and of course overall India's policies towards the world really. So Rick, coming to you, what Velina was saying about the tendency to criticize India on human rights, so-called human rights violations or backsliding of democracy. How does the United States or think tanks there see the outcome? Do you think Modi will have to temper and Modi's party will have to temper their, the agendas that they had, or it's business as usual?
I think it'll have to be tendered somewhat. Some of the criticism is definitely deserved. And look, saying this as somebody who thinks that Modi has done good things on U.S. India defense and economic reforms, but some of the criticisms are well deserved. There has been strong flashes of Hindu nationalism, pressure against free voices, whether it's journalists or think tanks, things like that, the crackdown on funding of NGOs trying to do good work on things like climate change and all that. But at the same time, is he an autocratic centralizer? Well, he abolished the planning commission, the single biggest tool the national government had to really sort of control and throttle states. And he voluntarily kind of gave that up and allow states to take lending from World Bank and Asian Development Bank directly rather than going through the center. So, of the criticism, like I always viewed, like some of it's valid, some of it, less so. And Modi's dominance and the concerns about democracy, I thought got a little overstated because, again, if you look over the last 8 years, the BJP has actually lost more state governments than they won. And some of those they managed to maintain chief ministerships were due to coalitions. So, but I do think, now that you got two parties vital to the coalition, both of them rely to some extent on Muslim votes, some of the things we were concerned about, would they do a national registry of citizens nationwide as they've done in Assam or take other steps like that? I think some of that will get tamped down. So I suspect this is net good. But you will also, because it's a coalition, every couple of months, there's going to be a crisis. One or both are going to threaten to pull out because they're not getting something for their home state. They're not getting this and that. So we definitely have a surfboard to ride on the waves in the months ahead.
Interesting times ahead, certainly. But before I come to you, Velina, one more question to you, Rick. You've always maintained that the Indian states need to, power the engine of growth in India. And in your view, now that TDP is back in power in Andhra Pradesh and knowing his track record, certainly Chandrababu Naidu will do this, like you pointed out. Even Nitish Kumar, I suspect, will have to now deliver on the economic front rather than just depend on the caste equations. But any other states that you see have to pull up their socks, say Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh, Orissa? What is your view on some of these states?
Yeah, state elections, I know a lot of times kind of the narrative in India, at least that they try to portray to investors, is state elections don't mean that much. State governments tend to carry out the policies of the predecessors. as somebody who lives in the details, that is not even close to true. You saw 5 years ago when the YSR Congress came in, they shredded the Naidu government's previous plans for the new capital city. They tried to tear up a lot of the power purchase contracts the previous government signed. State government changes can be massively disruptive in some cases, not always, but they can be. Is the Telugu Desam Party going to come back and try to refocus investments on creating the state capital, which I think they should? That'd be a good thing, but it's disruptive. Odisha, we've got the BJP for the first time running Odisha. Odisha had quietly done one of the most significant reforms happen in all of India in the last 20 years, which is once again, for the second time, privatizing the state-run power grids. And to me, you think about the lack of reliable electric power, it's one of the reasons Make in India hasn't taken off. There's been a great first 5 years since Tata took over the 4 discoms. Things are improving, more people have access. So I do hope that they kind of let some of the good things that previous governments have done to kind of stay. And I think in Andhra's case, Naidu, his vision, I'd like to see that kind of executed as well. So stability for the good things and change for the things that need to be changed. That's what I want to see out of these evolving state governments.
True, absolutely. So in that context, one of the challenges that a lot of analysts in India see for Modi 3.0 is the aggressive Chinese moves against India in every respect, not just militarily, but also in other aspects of international relations. So, Velina, one of your favorite subjects, one of your favorite targets, China. How will it behave as far as the third iteration of the Modi government is concerned?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting that I'm now giving this interview for I don't know how many times. Meanwhile, in the last several weeks following the bilateral summit between Xi Jinping and Putin, the Russian president. They're, by the way, going to meet again in July, in just a month. And obviously, this is a big challenge for India in itself, the modus vivendi of coordination between China and Russia. But at the same time, it opens up a lot of opportunities, specifically on the side of Russia. I see that this strategic partnership with Russia is here to stay. Under Modi 3.0, it's going to be facilitated more in a sense of getting cheap, affordable commodities, probably also in the portfolio of gas, not only in the portfolio of oil. We know for a fact that the fertilizers are a big strategic export to India, for the obvious reason that India is wheat producer number 1 in the world. And of course, the arms sales are also, even though that they will shrink, will still remain significant and important. Now, when it comes to China, my expectation is that on the one hand, having Modi and third mandate, so that means someone who has been dealing with Xi Jinping for the last 10 years, and obviously next to him also with Putin, he will of course seek to keep this relationship as stable and predictable as possible. Now, I wouldn't say that we may not see further, let's say, direct skirmishes and military clashes along the line of actual control, but I would argue that this could be just minor episodes, and obviously with the climate change, with the increasing portfolio of India as a geo-economic power, if Modi succeeds in his goal of, let's say, uplifting India up to the third place as world economic power number 3, that there you go. Then this number of skirmishes may increase because of the obviously of the overlapping interests in the region. But then again, India will also increase its role in the regional formats. BRICS Plus is going to welcome new members. Turkey has just submitted its membership application, and that means more opportunities from India's point of view. So being at the table instead of being on the menu is the Indian position, and I think this is a smart policy. Last sentence. So this kind of bridge role that India has been playing during the last mandate, I think is going to continue in terms of taking the best from both worlds, deepening the relationship with the United States and with the so-called West, especially when it comes to tech transfer and modernization. But then again, also trying to keep your enemies close in order to deal with this relationship.
True. So, Velina, I'm going to ask both of you for your final concluding comments and what two things that you wish that will happen in the next 5 years. But I must say this: not only Rick, but even you are famous here in India. There is somebody called Gillette Man who's sent out a comment: "Dragon Bear," term coined by Velina. That's a compliment to your popularity in India, which I think most people watch you for what you bring to the table as far as the relationship between India, China and Russia, and of course the effect on other countries is concerned. But Rick, your final thoughts, your two big wishes for the next 5 years in India.
Well, they both kind of ring and are similar to each other. Number one, I do hope that the Modi government, even under coalition, can find the muscle to be able to get back to its idea of competitive federalism, to challenge states to do better. And similar to that, I would like to see the United States, again, develop a much stronger strategy to engage India's states and engage the regional parties. Our goals on helping India become a stronger manufacturing power to meet its climate targets, all that relies on states taking action, not Delhi. And if we can do small things from our side to try to facilitate that, those are my two big things.
Great. Well, your thoughts, your two or three wishes, if you wish.
Okay, our audience will not be surprised if I say, as an European, that what I want to see happening in the next 5 years is obviously the adoption, actually, of the European Union-India Free Trade Agreement, because this will be the framework for trade and investment between one of the most significant common markets, that is the European Common Market on the one hand, and obviously emerging world economic power number 3, India. And the second thing I would argue would be the migration policy. Why? Because we have a very young and vibrant population in India, to some extent also well educated, but not finding the suitable jobs in India. And at the same time, we have a very aging population in Europe, which of course is becoming a big problem. And I argue that if migration policy is smart between Europe and India, both countries can benefit from this. And I want this to happen in the next 5 years.
Great. I think this is what we must strive for in our discussions, in our kind of writing, whatever we do, and therefore I think we will. I think discuss this again 6 months down the line and see where we are going. Tomorrow, of course, Prime Minister Modi takes charge again, a fresh card, as they say in cricket, and hopefully it will be a team that will also conquer new heights, as the Indian cricket team is trying to do in the United States. As we speak, tomorrow morning there is a India-Pakistan clash. India time tomorrow morning, India-Pakistan cricket match, which will be watched by billions in India and Pakistan both. But let's see where it goes. But at the moment, that's all we can have time for. Thank you both again for joining me on this Saturday and sparing your time and your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So do keep watching Strat News Global. This was a special edition of Simply Nitin, which went live. But of course, the recording will also be available on the YouTube channel of Strat News Global. Keep sending your comments as you have done even during the live telecast. And of course, your feedback is extremely important to us. So that's your channel to go to, Strat News Global, and our sister channel, bharatshakti.in. For the time being, it's goodbye and good evening.